and witnesses and guests to this hearing of the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee on DOD's fiscal year 2012 budget request for science and technology programs. We are expected to have some votes shortly. My hope is we can at least get all the witness statements in before that time and hopefully beyond that. But in light of time constraints, I will certainly be brief. I think most of us would agree that the programs that are the subject of today's hearing are the future of the Department of Defense and in many ways of our country's security. And yet, with tight budgets, they are always in danger of being squeezed because you often don't see the consequences of those reductions immediately. And so the temptation is always there to cut our future, and that, in my view, would be a dangerous thing. The Administration's fiscal year 12 request for the programs before us today is $12.2 billion. I understand if you look across the FIDP, there's about a 2% increase in basic research, but across the FIDP, the rest of the accounts are essentially flat. I have some concerns about that, but it is important, I know, for all of us to keep the total budget in perspective, but that's an area we may want to explore more. Obviously, all of your written statements will be made part of the record, and I appreciate a number of the examples you've given us in those written statements. And we'll explore more of those in questions. At this time, I'd yield to the ranking member for any comments he'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to express my thanks to all of our witnesses here today. Let me just say that I firmly believe that the continued strength of our nation is reliant upon our ability to continue to lead the world in innovation and advanced research and development. From GPS to the Internet, we are all aware of the benefits that investments in defense science and technology have had on our daily lives. But what is sometimes overlooked is the remarkable impact these programs have on our national economic and educational competitiveness as well. The goal of these programs is to invest in emerging science that will become the backbone of tomorrow's fighting force. To do this, however, the United States must maintain a strong research and development capability housed inside and outside of government by partnering with industry and academia. For example, 60% of the Department's basic research investment, $1.2 billion, goes directly to local universities to promote projects advancing knowledge and understanding across a wide array of fields, from advanced mathematics to environmental sciences. These programs not only have a vital national security benefit, but are a critical source of funding to keep the U.S. leading in the world in academic research and development. Similarly, the Department devotes the majority of its remaining science and technology budget to support defense laboratories and industry research efforts as well. While much of these funds goes to support larger contractors and corporations, the Department also makes targeted investments in small businesses that specialize in specific high-technology research and development efforts. These smaller partners provide critical technology that is often too narrow and highly specialized for larger companies to consider. Because of their size, small, high-tech companies can often complete specific research and development projects faster and more efficiently than larger contractors positioned to handle major, large-scale programs. Now, these small businesses are excellent tools in achieving great efficiencies in the Department's science and technology efforts, and I certainly commend the Department for recognizing their importance. I have, however, been troubled that our efforts in Congress to authorize initiatives like the Small Business Innovative Research, or SBIR, programs and the Mentor-Protege program have fallen in many ways by the wayside. With that in mind, I hope that our panel will address specific efforts to increase outreach and partner with academia and small businesses. With that, I would certainly look forward to hearing your testimony, and I want to thank our witnesses for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now turn to our witnesses. We have the Honorable Zachary Limnios, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. We have Dr. Marilyn Freeman, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Research and Technology. Rear Admiral Nevin Carr, Chief of Naval Research. Dr. Stephen Walker, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Science, Technology, and Engineering. And Dr. Regina Dugan, Director of Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, known as DARPA. Ms. Secretary, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Chairman Thornberry, Ranking Member Langevin, and committee members. I ask that my written testimony be entered into the record. Before I outline our plans for next year, it's important that I comment on the effects of a year-long continuing resolution or a reduction in the FY11 budget request. To echo Secretary Gates, either of these scenarios would create a crisis in the Department, including the research and engineering enterprise. We need the funds in the FY11 request for existing and planned programs to develop the capabilities our troops have simply asked for, and to ensure that many of our small businesses who develop those capabilities, in fact, stay in business. Operating under a long CR, or well below the President's FY11 budget request, puts both at risk and results in both a loss of valuable time and the ability to support our troops. As a Department's Chief Technology Officer, I want to thank you for the opportunity to tell you about the important work that the dedicated men and women in the Department of Defense Research and Engineering Enterprise perform every day to support our nation's security. This enterprise encompasses a remarkable pool of talent and resources. Our footprint includes 67 Department laboratories dispersed across 22 states with a total workforce of 60,000 employees, 36,400 of which are degreed scientists and engineers who publish thousands of papers in peer-reviewed journals and keep the Department at the forefront of technology. We operate 10 federally funded research and development centers, 13 university-affiliated research centers, and 10 information analysis centers across critical disciplines for the Department, supporting the combatant commanders in all disciplines. Their successes would not have been possible without Congress's help, and you have my heartfelt thanks for your steadfast support of our programs. We are in a period of remarkable change. Innovation, speed, and agility have taken on greater importance to our efforts, given globalization, access to knowledge, and to the rapid pace of technology development. In this environment, it's critical that we first operate with urgency to meet the immediate needs of our warfighters, that we prepare for the future by establishing the technical foundations for innovative new capabilities for the operational missions described in the Quadrennial Defense Review, and remain on the constant lookout for opportunities to create and avoid technology surprise, and to assure that we have the supply of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics capabilities across the Department. We are strategically shaping this enterprise to address these challenges. The Department's science and technology investments are well coordinated, they are focused on high-quality research efforts, and they are responsive to the current and future warfighter needs. The Department's research and engineering enterprise is structured around the following 4 imperatives. First, to accelerate the delivery of technical capabilities to win the current fight. We remain responsive to this urgent operational needs of our combatant commanders. For example, in Afghanistan, the Army's Research, Engineering, and Development Command leverages a network of science and technology teams and advisors to collect and distribute firsthand knowledge of warfighter needs across the Department. I've seen this, and I'll tell you the results are remarkable. Second, we need to prepare for an uncertain future. In 2010, we established the Department's Science and Technology Executive Committee, which I chair, which includes all of my colleagues here today. This committee identified 7 priority areas for investments that would provide dominant technical advantage across the mission space for the near and far-term needs of the Department. Our programs in basic research and technology watch have been restructured to ensure our scientists are involved early and potentially shaping disruptive emerging science areas to great advantage for the Department and to the nation. Our third imperative is to reduce the cost, the acquisition time, and the risk of our major defense acquisition systems. Last year, the Department implemented new systems engineering policy and guidance to drive better technical performance for the Department's acquisition programs. This included the Trusted Defense Systems strategy to streamline, to update and to apply program protection and supply chain risk management policy, guidance, and methods. And our fourth imperative is to develop world-class science, technology, engineering, and mathematics capabilities for the Department and for the nation. We realize that our technical goals are only achievable with exceptional research and engineering talent. And our STEM programs have provided the resources and the strategy to train and recruit the workforce we need in the future. We continue to foster a strong relationship with future scientists and engineers. Our STEM efforts have reached out to over 180,000 students, 8,000 teachers across the country. Our Science, Mathematics, and Research to Transformation, or our SMART program, funds 670 undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral students in 19 DOD relevant fields of study. This is the Department's research and engineering enterprise and our focus. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to present these remarks. With congressional support for the President's budget, the research and engineering enterprise will have the resources it needs to ensure a strong technical base to enhance the nation's security. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Dr. Freeman.
Chairman Thornberry and the distinguished members of this subcommittee, I want to thank you for your steadfast support of our soldiers who are now at war and for your support of Army S&T investments that will continue to assure technological preeminence for our soldiers in the future. Your continued advocacy is essential for our success. I appreciate this opportunity to discuss the fiscal year 2012 Army Science and Technology program and the significant role that Army S&T has in supporting our warfighters. I have submitted a written statement and request it be accepted for record. I assumed the role of Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Research and Technology in July of 2010. I came to this job with over 30 years of experience in various positions in Army S&T and in DARPA. I am privileged to represent a cadre of over 12,000 scientists and engineers who are dedicated and are highly skilled in their jobs, who comprise the Army S&T community. My mission is to revitalize Army S&T, to foster better discovery, invention, innovation, and demonstration of technologies, both for the current and the future. We are ever mindful that our technologies and systems are tools that we provide the men and women who voluntarily put themselves in harm's way for our country. As a result of the past 10 years of war, the Army has rediscovered the fundamental precept that the soldier, operating as part of a small team or combat unit, is our decisive weapon. This has led us to consider a different approach to S&T, in which our focus is shifting from big platforms and large systems to more soldier-centric solutions. We must provide technology-enabled capabilities that empower, unburden, and protect our soldiers. While Army S&T has always provided new capabilities and enhancements to our existing capabilities, it is time that we step up our game and focus on results that will get the most needed advanced capabilities to our soldiers more quickly and more affordably than ever before. I believe that the fiscal year 2012 S&T budget we submitted will enable us to accomplish this task. I'm convinced that in a fast-paced, complex global economy, Army S&T needs to be better focused, more accountable, and more transparent than ever before. To that end, I've already begun to reshape my headquarters organization to better serve the needs of the soldier and to ensure that Army S&T is the go-to place for Army senior leadership on all S&T and engineering issues. I'm also reorganizing the management of our investments to allow for better oversight and a more holistic perspective across all of our lines. We are organizing our program into 4 portfolios: soldier, ground, air, and command, control, and communications. Now, included in these are all of the items and areas with which you are familiar, including lethality, survivability, medical research, training, and manufacturing technology. By organizing our enterprise in this way, we are able to manage each portfolio in terms of FAR term, basic research, midterm applied research, and near-term advanced technology development. My written testimony provides some specific details on the efforts in each portfolio. Especially in this constrained budget environment, Army S&T must better synchronize our programs and major efforts with fiscal processes and timelines determined by the needs of the warfighter. In the coming months, I will be working with the Army senior leadership, our partners in TRADOC, the program executive offices, and the leaders in our S&T labs and centers to develop a list of top priority issues or problems that require S&T to close gaps. This list will be used to shape our S&T programs with quantified objectives for the near term and will help us better focus our applied and basic research efforts as well. This set of clear priorities will help us to be more effective in reaching out to industry, to other services, to academia, and other government agencies to identify partnership and leveraging opportunities. The health and long-term viability of our labs will be one of our major challenges in the years to come. We have long worked to make improvements at the margins, and where possible we have used the BRAC process to modernize facilities and infrastructures, but this is not a long-term solution. Over the coming year, I intend to take an in-depth look and look forward to working with you to help fix this problem. In closing, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to testify before this subcommittee and for your support to Army Science and Technology. I look forward to working with you and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, and I appreciate both of y'all keeping your oral comments pretty close to 5 minutes. With the number of witnesses and members we have, that's a challenge, and I appreciate that very much. Admiral, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm joined today by my Deputy Marine Corps Brigadier General Tom Hedlund, who's right behind me. It's an honor to report on science and technology efforts within the Department of the Navy and to discuss how the President's FY 2012 budget request supports the Navy and Marine Corps. The Office of Naval Research works closely with the Secretary, Chief of Naval Operations, and Commandant of the Marine Corps to address critical challenges to ensure that we focus on S&T areas that provide the biggest payoff for the future, embrace innovative thinking and business processes, and maximize transition of S&T products into acquisition programs and commercial use. We do this in the most efficient and effective manner possible to strike that right balance between responsive near-term technology insertion and unfettered, long-term, innovative basic research. It's that latter category that holds the greatest potential to provide the underpinnings for game-changing disruptive technologies like GPS, electromagnetic railgun, and free electron laser. There are many Navy S&T products in use today, with many more on the way. They may not always be highly visible, but they're there, from better paint to life-saving medical advances and energy-saving technologies. Among our greatest challenges is helping ensure students pursue and succeed in science, technology, engineering, and math disciplines. This is critical to the future quality of our S&T workforce and our global competitiveness. The United States is the world's technology leader, but we must continue to support a strong S&T base if we are to maintain that position, especially in the face of current global trends. As Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Admiral Mullen testified recently, one of the ways you protect against the unknowns is to make sure that S&T and pure R&D budgets are both comprehensive and broad. You need that innovation. You need the investment for capabilities of the future that starts there. The country's R&D effort is being driven increasingly by industrial and commercial demand. In 1960, 75% of all U.S. R&D was government funded. Today, that proportion has dropped to 25%, and contained within that decreasing 25% is the higher risk basic research that may not provide the ROI that industry demands. This further underscores the importance of our S&T portfolio, and especially that portion dedicated to basic research. This is our seed corn. As a measure of research quality, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, the IEEE, recently ranked the U.S. Navy's patent portfolio as the strongest of any government organization in the world. Quality is important, but so is depth. Transition of S&T products to warfighters is our critical metric, and we track every single product to ensure we maximize that transition, we understand and correct the causes of failure when it does occur. Strong S&T investment is about managing risk. If every product transitions easily, we're not out there far enough pushing the edge of technology. About 75% of our current transition rate At about 75%, our current transition rate represents a good balance between risk and payoff. Even so, many transitioning technologies wouldn't be ready today without those basic research investments that were made 20 to 30 years ago. We focus much of our investment on industry and academia within this country and around the world in order to tap the full measure of innovation, to push for technologies that have commercial application where possible. For example, algorithms developed for sonar signal processing are now helping reduce breast cancer detection rates, and our active small business innovative research partnerships generate new jobs across the country while increasing innovation and competition. The President's 2012 budget request will help the Navy and Marine Corps benefit from carefully considered technology investment and build on strong partnerships among the services, OSD, and throughout government and partner countries. I believe the state of our S&T investments is sound, represents good stewardship of taxpayers' dollars, and enhances significantly the safety and performance of our warfighters today and well into the future. Thank you again for your support, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Admiral. Dr. Walker.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee and staff, I am pleased to have the opportunity to provide testimony on the fiscal year 2012 Air Force Science and Technology Program. The Air Force fiscal year 2012 President's budget request for S&T is approximately $2.3 billion, which includes an increase of $95 million, or a 2.8% real growth from the fiscal year 2011 budget. This increase reflects the Air Force leadership's steadfast support for its S&T program, even in the face of a very challenging fiscal environment. A lot has happened since I testified here about a year ago as the brand new S&T executive for the Air Force. I've enjoyed this new role and the many challenges and opportunities it has provided. It's been busy, but we've gotten a lot done. I'm pleased to say that this past year the Air Force has developed and published an S&T strategy, first of its kind since 2004, created a collaborative S&T planning process that maintains a balanced technology push from the laboratory and a technology pull from the warfighter. The Air Force S&T program provides the foundation for the majority of the Air Force's strategic priorities. These strategic priorities, along with the input from the warfighter, our S&T vision as articulated in Technology Horizons, and our S&T strategy, inform our new S&T planning effort to help shape our future investments. The S&T planning process, which was created over the past year with extensive participation from across the Air Force, provides a framework for the major commands, the product centers, and the Air Force Research Laboratory to work collaboratively to identify and understand both technology needs and potential solutions. The Air Force's S&T fiscal year 2012 President's budget request supports 4 overarching priorities detailed in the strategy. I'd like to discuss those with you briefly. Priority 1 is to support the current fight while advancing breakthrough S&T for tomorrow's dominant warfighting capabilities. We must invest in S&T that will enable the Air Force to operate effectively and achieve desired results in all domains and operations, both today and in the future. The Air Force Rapid Reaction and Innovation process, known as Core Process 3, is designed to tightly integrate S&T knowledge with operator knowledge to deliver solutions to the warfighter in 12 months or less. In the past year, we've developed several quick reaction solutions, one recently to Air Mobility Command, single drops-on, single-pass airdrop capability for Air Mobility Command. It's also important to note that we create technology options for the future. We've increased our basic research funding by $18 million to focus on far-term priorities as well. For example, efforts are underway in our robust scramjet program that will support future long-range strike and operationally responsive space access solutions. Priority 2 is to execute a balanced, integrated S&T program that's responsive to the Air Force Service Corps functions. This priority essentially speaks to where we will invest our next S&T dollar. We've established a program element for sustainment that is dedicated to developing and demonstrating technologies to address operational sustainment issues in existing systems, as well as supporting new systems. We're investing new resources toward emerging warfighter concepts, supporting the needs of the nuclear enterprise, reducing our vulnerabilities to cyber attack, evolving our intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capability, demonstrating long-range strike technologies, and investing in a diverse energy technology portfolio. We're also tapping innovative ideas from small business to help us in all these efforts. Priority 3 is to retain and shape the critical competencies needed to address the full range of S&T product and support capabilities. Said another way, we must have a dedicated, educated, and highly skilled workforce of scientists and engineers. And towards that end, we are actively seeking to improve our intramural basic research program and increase our organic cyber workforce. We're also supporting Air Force science, technology, engineering, and mathematics initiatives to develop and optimally manage the S&E workforce of the future. Bright Horizons, an Air Force STEM strategic roadmap for shaping the way the Air Force manages its mission-critical STEM capabilities, is currently in coordination and is expected to be signed this spring. Finally, Priority 4 is to ensure the Air Force S&T program addresses the highest priority capability needs of the Air Force. And as part of that, we established this S&T planning process and created something called a Flagship Capability concept. These are Air Force-led demonstrations of capability. The Vice Chief has recently endorsed 3, a high-velocity penetrating weapon, a reusable space access program, and a cyber program that I can talk about later. These 3 programs will be at the forefront of where the Air Force Research Laboratory goes in demonstrating new capability for the warfighter. In conclusion, the Air Force S&T program is balanced to address warfighting needs, both near-term and far-term, by focusing on the S&T priorities documented in the recent strategy and utilizing the new Air Force planning process to listen and respond to the warfighter. The Air Force S&T program will continue to provide the technological edge needed to win today's fight and prepare for tomorrow's challenges. Mr. Chairman, thank you again for the opportunity to testify today, and thank you for your continued support of the Air Force S&T program.
Thank you. Dr. Dugan.
It is said that vision without execution is daydreaming. There is a time and a place for daydreaming, but it is not at DARPA. DARPA is a place of doing. For 50 years, our doing has been the creation and prevention of strategic surprise. Today, I'd like to focus on a few examples that characterize the breadth of activities at the agency. They are intended to open the door for an ongoing exchange. Chairman Thornberry, Ranking Member Langevin, members of the subcommittee, my name is Regina Dugan. I am the Director of DARPA, and I am honored to be here. Submitted for the record in support of our budget request is the agency's full testimony. If I'm able to leave you with only 3 key takeaways, this is what I'd like you to know. First, strategic surprise does not conform to a predetermined timeline. Sometimes it requires 5 to 10 years, sometimes only 90 days. This spectrum is revealed most vividly in our support to operations in Afghanistan. Within 90 days, a skunkworks effort yielded advances in computational techniques. An analysis cell went to ISAF headquarters 3 weeks later. We stood up a forward operating cell. 3 months later, a wide area LiDAR system, 5 years in the making, was providing 3D maps to users. At full operational capacity, the HALO system can map 50% of Afghanistan in 90 days, whereas previous systems would have required 3 years. Second, efficiency is, of course, the ratio of output to input. Speed and leanness are important to the input. Choosing among ideas is the challenge for output. And frankly, that's the hard part. Speed is part of the vibrancy of innovation, and the absence of bureaucracy is a brand attribute of DARPA. In the last year, our contracting time has been reduced by 20%, and by September, improved execution had put $600 million more to work for defense and in the economy than in any of the 5 years prior. We have had the same number of program managers since 1992. The output side is governed by how we choose. The real challenge at DARPA is not generating ideas, it's choosing among them. To address this challenge, we have developed several deeply quantitative analytic frameworks. Through them, we ask, where are the opportunities to effect changes not in the margins, but in big, bold strokes? As an example, the time required to design, test, and build complex defense systems has grown from 2 years to more than 10. We simply must improve our ability to make things. Our Adaptive Make program seeks to bring manufacturing advances like those realized in semiconductor, software, and protein production to defense systems. The goal? Compress the time to field military ground vehicles by a factor of 5. There is no issue more fundamental to the nation's defense and competitiveness than this. because to innovate, we must make, and to protect, we must produce. Finally, current approaches to cybersecurity are necessary, but they are divergent with an evolving threat. This calls for aggressive R&D, and we are stepping up to the challenge. Over the last 20 years, security software has increased from thousands of lines of code to over 10 million lines of code. By contrast, malware has remained at a near constant average of 125 lines of code. 10 million versus 125. It's like being in the ocean and treading water. You must, but if that's all you do, eventually you will drown. We need new options. So we recruited an expert team, increased our investment, and launched several new initiatives. 3 key takeaways then. DARPA's singular mission is the creation and prevention of strategic surprise, which can happen over a decade or in 90 days. Choosing among alternatives is where we realize big payoffs in effectiveness. This is highlighted by our need to improve manufacturing, because to innovate, we must make, and to protect, we must produce. And finally, current approaches to cybersecurity are divergent with an evolving threat. We need new options. This past year was one of vision paired with execution. Chairman Thornberry, Ranking Member Langevin, and members of the subcommittee, I thank you for your support, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Doctor, and let me thank you all again for condensing down. I know you have a lot to say, and I know it's hard to do that in a 5-minute period, but I'm grateful for the reasons I've indicated. It also occurs to me as I survey the table there and read up on your credentials, your experience, the country is very fortunate to have each of you in the positions you are. Each of you could be making a whole lot more money doing other things, and we're grateful that you're doing. Yeah. We're grateful that you and the folks who work with you are doing what you're doing. I'm going to yield my 5 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Schuster, to go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate all of you being here today. I agree with what the Chairman said. You a lot of firepower, brain power out there, and we certainly appreciate what you do for our nation. First, Dr. Dugan, you made the comment you've had the same number of project managers since 1992. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
How have you been able to do that? You're probably the only department in the Federal Government that's able to make that claim. Yeah. How have you been able to do this? Is it innovation? Is it, I mean, what goes on over there that keeps you at that level and keeps you continuing to produce a high level of work?
Program managers at DARPA come for a tour that lasts about 3 to 5 years. They run projects at the agency with a similar time period. And so many scientists and engineers view their time at DARPA as their service to country. And as a result, we have a constant influx of new ideas, new expertise, and so on.
I guess that's something we can learn throughout the government and how to do that, so I appreciate that. Mr. Lemonos, you and I have discussed before a program that's out there, First Link, that works with the Department's science and technology efforts, its research activities, working with all branches, including the Defense Office of Technology, Air Force Research, the Navy, the Army Research Laboratory, and their mission is to accelerate the rate that technologies from the Pentagon laboratories are transitioned into commercially viable application for you and for first responders. And we've had the discussion, wanted to know what the status of that program. They've done a great job of moving those technologies forward and giving back money to the Department of Defense, so they're working at no cost. So wondered what's going on with those programs, and what do you view the future of that type of program?
Well, Representative, that program is not in the President's FY12 budget, but we've looked broader at how we can incorporate those concepts as part of the small business programs, and we're doing just that. In fact, the Innovative Research Program that was in the authorization bill, the funding actually doesn't track it yet, is part of that thinking. And what we've done broadly across the SBIR program is look at how we can pull ideas out of that community, couple those with a warfighter and with the service needs, and do that more effectively. In fact, just this last month, we looked at our Phase 1 and Phase 2 efforts that were currently funded. We've identified a number of projects, and we're looking at how we could accelerate those to the next phase. So we're trying to take what came out of the First Link effort and really broaden it across the department in some other efforts.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand that thinking at this point in time when we have, we're looking at budgets, we're looking at ways to save money when you've got a program that's returned $6.5 million back to the Department of Defense. Why are we cutting it out at this time? Why wouldn't we be looking at these? And I know there's other companies out there that are doing the same sorts of things. Why are we doing that? And that's why I started off my first question to Dr. Dugan about how they're able to perform at such a high level with the same numbers. It just seems to me that this administration wants to bring things in-house that doesn't always have a positive outcome when it comes to the bottom line, when it comes to producing things quickly. So how does that logic work in this case?
Well, I can tell you that with regard to our small business community that we care deeply about, that the ingredient there is to be more informative with that community in terms of what our department needs are, and to try to couple those efforts earlier on into that process. And in fact, last year at this hearing, I took a question from Congresswoman Sanchez on exactly that topic in terms of how do we more effectively couple that. I think I sent you a note just recently in terms of how we would do that with regard to the FedBizOps portal. So we're looking at the broad issues of how do we couple the small business community into this enterprise. We looked across our budget and our programs, and as part of that, we think that there's a broader way to address that issue.
So $6.5 million over the past couple of years, you've decided that's not been a good return for you on it. Again, I talk to the small business community all the time and involved in an effort right now where the small business community across DOD feels as though they're not getting a fair shake, and that's where many of these ideas come from. So it just seems to me cutting out something like this that's has had a good return is going about it in the wrong way, especially when we're looking at reducing budgets or finding savings in the Department of Defense. So I see my time is ready to expire. So I'll be watching closely, and I'm sure we'll be communicating to see what happens here. And I have great doubts that we're going to see this kind of success by moving it into by the department. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Obviously, they just called votes, but I'll yield to the ranking member to ask his questions, and then we'll come back immediately after the last vote. Mr. Langevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thanks to our panel for your testimony today. Let me start with Secretary Limneos. Secretary, in the FY 2011 Defense Authorization Act that passed the House and the Senate earlier this year, the committees directed the Secretary of Defense to establish a competitive merit-based rapid innovation program to accelerate the transitioning of promising technologies into actual defense acquisition programs. The funding for this initiative was included in the continuing resolution we sent to the Senate, but obviously hasn't passed into law just yet. The language in the bill provides large leeway for the Department to select promising projects under this program from SBIR Phase 2, defense laboratories, and other innovative initiatives. I think everyone on the committee would be interested in hearing how the Department plans on administering the program once it's funded. And I believe that funding this program was appropriated in each of the services as well. So I'd welcome, of course, the comment from the other witnesses on this topic.
Congressman, thank you for the question. That was exactly the program that I referred to earlier. In fact, we've gone through and looked at our SBIR programs to identify those that have a direct connection to combatant needs over the course of the last several months. In fact, we started this process last August when we had our first discussions on this topic. We've identified a number of Phase 1 and Phase 2 efforts that are far enough into the process that we ought to be transitioning those to end-user needs, and we're looking at how we might do that within our existing authorities and existing budget short of an H.R. 1 passing. So I'd agree with you that there are some low-hanging fruit. We've identified a few of those, and we'll be working over the next several months responsive to the statute to come back with a plan that supports this broadly across the Department.
Thank you. Other witnesses commented on this?
I would just add that we get great leverage out of the SBIR program, and we rely on it. We have about a little over 1,000 relationships with industry in terms of our basic and applied research, and over 800 of those were with small business. Not all of those are through SBIR, but we rely very heavily on small business and want to do what we can to keep the relationship strong.
On the Air Force side, we're interested in getting more money into sustainment, and so we've thought about using some of the money in that fund for small business to participate and answer needs from our air logistics centers, because we'd like to get, and I think the opportunities to transition and commercialize small business activities on the sustainment side is huge, and we haven't taken a great advantage of that up to this point, so I would use some of that money for that.
And on the Army side, we also have lots and lots of experience and good results coming out of both Phase 1 and Phase 2, about $475 million in the Army in this program. And we remain committed to execute this program. And part of what I'm looking at for the Army SBIR is how to streamline the process a little bit better in the way we actually select the programs and actually go forward with selecting programs. And in that part of that process, I want to look at those that are Phase 2 and match them up with, as I talked about, some of those big ideas and big Army challenges that we have, closing gaps, and be able to identify those that are really high payoff, big promising to fill some of those gaps, and I would use the money to be able to accelerate those and get those into essentially Phase 3 and transition those programs either into national stock number type items or into acquisition programs of record.
I'll just comment on our engagement with small businesses generally. So above our approximately 2.8% mandate in SBIR, the agency funds approximately threefold that amount to small businesses. Our engagement with them is focused not only on getting them resources, but also increasing our speed to get them under contract, because speed is so important to small businesses, and as well simplifying our approach. So as I mentioned earlier, our contracting time is down by over 20% at this point with small businesses. We've reduced our contract vehicle from approximately a 50-page contract to a 10-page contract. And we have conducted over the last year 2 industry summits. We've had more than 200 companies in. 70% of those companies were small businesses. They represent 16 different segments from 30 different states. So our engagement with the small business community from DARPA is very robust, both in terms of the ideas that they bring and as well their performance in our portfolio.
Thank you. Well, my time's expired, but let me just say that there are so many incredible small businesses out there that have these innovative products to offer, and as we pointed out, have been effective at making sure that some of them have been brought to the warfighter very effectively that otherwise might have been ignored by big business, and we need to do more. I haven't been satisfied that SBIR has functioned as it really was intended, and it hasn't been as robust as it could be. But we need to rededicate ourselves to these kind of type programs that will support ultimately the technologies and ultimately the protecting and helping the warfighter. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. It looks like we have 3 votes. We have just about 9 minutes remaining in this vote. My guess is that's probably going to mean 25 to 30 minutes probably before we're back. Y'all make yourself as comfortable as you can. We'll be back as soon as we can. Hearing will be in recess.
The savings to the Department is the savings in essentially overhead, if we could call it that, and latency of execution. There were other projects as well across the Department that were moved to the services where they could be more efficiently executed without compromising the intent of those programs.
Are you going to be able to quantify that? Sorry, Mr. West, in the way, but are you able to quantify? There are, in fact, savings. I mean, it's one thing to be intuitive about it, but something else if you can actually show where that's happened.
Well, I will tell you that the Secretary and certainly Dr. Carter is challenging us to quantify every one of the efficiencies transfers that we've made, and we're in the middle of doing just that.
Question for all of you in the time remaining. The acquisitions panel that Rob Andrews and I worked on had extensive testimony on that prototypes used earlier in the system would in fact save money or avoid cost overruns or cost or challenges that happen by delaying that? Have you been able to push prototyping further up, earlier into the food chain or the stream to any advantage at this point? And if any of you could answer.
Yeah, let me take it first. We actually are doing something, and in our request there is a $10 million increase in Army S&T. We established a 6-4 funding line that I will manage out of Army S&T specifically to try to get competitive prototyping and taking technologies that are relatively and very mature, high payoff type technologies and taking them to a higher technology readiness level. And what this does is we intend to increase this line over time. So this is sort of a beginning of that process of moving that prototyping earlier and earlier. And we are starting with $10 million. We're going to probably do a couple of programs this year. And then we will transition those over to acquisition programs, and then we will increase that line over time where we can do more and more and more of that kind of prototyping.
Okay.
We have a similar initiative too. Although the 6-4 at this point is not being given directly over to me, I'm looking for. I've been asked to put programs forward that would benefit from the application of 6-4. We call it Speed to Fleet. About 30% of my budget is our future naval capabilities, and these develop 5 to 7 year time horizon component technologies that go into programs of record. And so aligning those prototypes with the program of record and making it so that the prototype can flow into the program of record with lower risk and lower cost, that's that lubrication we're looking for.
Okay.
At a higher end, we have what we call our innovative naval prototypes. These are the high risk, high payoff, like free electron laser and electromagnetic railgun. These will deliver working prototypes that won't necessarily flow into a program of record, but are disruptive technology, so it's a slightly different application.
And so part of our planning process I talked about was to generate these flagship capability concepts. These are large-scale integrated demonstrations of technology and connect those with development planning efforts to, as the Admiral said, feed into programs of record the Air Force is thinking about. So the three we picked this year all have development planning efforts and potential future programs of record that the Air Force is lining up. So the ability to connect S&T with the new program of record is what we were after.
We have a very aggressive manufacturing initiative at DARPA precisely to deal with some of the concerns that the members here have raised. The Deputy Director and I both come from private industry. We have both been engaged in the design, test, build, and fielding of original new equipment. And one of the things that we observed is that every time we hit a seam in that process, when we go from design to prototype, from prototype to first production run, from first production run to full production run, every time we hit a seam, we encounter problems. Now, when we examined the timeline to develop and field complex defense systems, we noted this increase from 2 years to 10 years. And then we sought existence proofs, essentially, of other industries where they weren't realizing that significant growth. And we observed them in the semiconductor industry, in software, and in pharmaceutical protein production. And in each case, it is true that when you can improve the quality of your design tools such that you have correct by construction type designs, you improve the fluidity of your manufacture, you can begin to erase these seams. And it's with that very aggressive perspective that we are pursuing advances in manufacturing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Gibson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank the panel for coming today. I appreciate your testimony and the tremendous work you're doing on behalf of all of our servicemen and women. I have a series of questions. We'll see how far we get on them. If not, I'll submit them for the record. The first has to do with brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'm interested to know the scope, where research is being done, and a summary of preliminary observations. I guess I'll point that towards Dr. Freeman and Admiral Carr, although I'll be willing to hear from anybody that has anything on that score.
Yeah, thank you for that question, because that is something that we are absolutely positively working very, very hard on, and it's very frustrating for us as well as for the families and for the service members themselves who are suffering, whether it is with traumatic brain injury or post-traumatic stress disorders, that we're trying to really understand that. We're doing several things. We put a lot of money in a couple of years ago into the medical research in this area, and what that did is that seeded a lot of research efforts sort of across the board to get that understanding of what's going on. We are now in the process of taking that medical research and focusing it under several efforts and initiatives, and under this soldier portfolio that I was talking about, in pulling that research together to really make a huge difference. And a lot of that research is going on in universities, a lot of that research is going on in our medical centers, and what we're trying to do at this point, and I'm sorry to say we don't have an answer today of being able to stop and or totally treat and or basically restore everybody's capability here, but we are working very hard across the board in both the medical and non-medical areas to understand this problem. And we have a significant amount of our budget in the medical and in the non-medical work to address that.
Thank you also for the question. We at the Navy Research Lab right here down the river, we've done a lot of modeling on understanding the dynamics of traumatic brain injury, what goes on in the brain as it moves back and forth and overpressure. We've actually got mathematical models and physical models to try and understand that phenomenon better, and from that to understand a better helmet design, for example, how you might make sure the helmet's not part of the problem.
Yeah.
We're looking at additional technologies to try and inoculate the soldier or the Marine from that environment through training, through immersive training, multi-mode training that can be very effective, as the Marines like to say, so that the first firefight is no worse than the last simulation. And finally, to find and identify markers that might give us insight into people that are at greater risk for suffering post-traumatic stress disorder. And if I may just take a second and ask my Deputy General Hedlund if he's got anything to add about the training or the subject.
Thank you, sir. Many of the members may have visited the IIT facility out at Camp Pendleton, and as the Admiral mentioned, the technology that we are putting into that facility is aiding commanders, small unit leaders, and individual Marines in getting exposed to what we are now beginning to call resiliency, and to be able to make that a building block to a higher resiliency in our Marines. Now, brain injury is brain injury. That's a topic, and we've heard already from the panel on how difficult that is. But the post-traumatic stress piece may be preventable, at least to a degree, by some of the resiliency work that we're doing. So the IIT helps us there. There are a number of efforts in that realm. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the updates, and it's encouraging, and I look forward to continuing to stay in touch with that as we go forward.
I can add to that because we've had a role in TBI and also PTSD. The TBI work was foundational for us. It characterized the levels of blast that would result in damage that could be recovered, damage that needed to be treated, and damage that was catastrophic. That work was then fed into our efforts to develop a low-cost blast dosimeter. They work hand in glove. And both are part of an overall combat casualty care ethic at DARPA. We have 6 program managers devoted to combat casualty care. They have activities ranging from revolutionizing prosthetics all the way through to TBI.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate that. Ms. Dugan, one last thing before I hand it back to the Chairman. Have you been to the College of Nanoscale in Albany, New York yet?
I have not personally been, no, sir.
Oh, great. Would love to invite you on a trip. Some exciting research going on up there, and I'd like to introduce you to some of the folks up there if you have time.
Thank you for your invitation.
And I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, also Mr. Ranking Member. Dr. Freeman, as a career Army combat arms officer, pretty aware that many of our ground pounders have available to them an array of technologies that can greatly enhance their mission performance and probability of survivability. But they are unable to, carry a lot of this stuff as far as the full advantage of counter, sniper, IED, UAV, and communications platforms and other technologies. I have some people talk to me about a platform out there, system, and I'd like to know, have you heard about this thing called the JAKE? And if you have, can you tell me what stage we're in as far as assessing the JAKE? And if we see that it does have any merit, I mean, what's the way ahead? And, of course, how can this committee help you?
Yeah, that's, what you refer to is obviously, part of what we have rediscovered, as I said, about focusing on the soldier as the decisive weapon. And the idea that we have basically been adding things like ornaments on a Christmas tree, to give them more capability, but also then we end up burdening them both cognitively and physically, and as well as protecting them. And so we're really trying to understand this. First of all, let me tell you that we are starting an effort that is, we put an additional $10 million in to study soldier load and to really get our arms around all of the things that can help us for soldiers and small units to balance that load and to get that load off of the soldier, to reduce it down to acceptable levels, as opposed to the 130 pounds that many folks carry today that you're well aware of. I do know about the JAKE mobility. Well, the way I look at JAKE is it is an individual mobility type platform. It falls, in my mind, into the arena of being a way to offload some of the weight, because it can carry certain things that the soldier doesn't have to carry, but it also gets a soldier to the battle perhaps less fatigued. Now, having said that, there are a number of different concepts like that out there, and what I have offered to do, and we are pursuing this year, and I'm trying to get it done in the springtime here, maybe June type time frame, is do what we call a mobility war game, where we're going to bring people from across the Army together with, first of all, soldiers who have experience. We're going to have a vignette that we play, or a scenario that we play, that is really looking at how this small combat units would use equipment like JAKE and other kinds of mobility or offloading type technologies. We then compare the results of these tabletop war games and try to figure out, okay, what did the soldiers like about it? What didn't they like about it? How successful was it? Depending on the outcome of that game, then we can figure out where we want to go, if we want to go with JAKE or any of these other kinds of systems.
Thank you. And one other question I had. Last week, the AUSA Winter Symposium was down in our district in South Florida. And one of the, dovetailing off what Representative Gibson talked about, the BAE Systems has a helmet out there which has a brain sensor in it, which can help with the evaluative protocols in near time. Are we looking to see how we can develop that helmet system?
Yes, actually, Representative, we really have been working that. In fact, I've been working for, ever since I was up at Natick, we had a CRADA with BAE, and BAE has been looking on their IR&D, by the way, at these kinds of load and different equipment that will help unburden the soldier. And they did look at, and we have looked at their helmet design. We are taking those kinds of things because there are a number of helmet designs. We're working with the Natick folks, and we're working with the medical folks as well as the PEO to look at new helmet designs, and that will be included in how we look at where we're going. This would be beyond ACH.
Well, thank you very much, panel, and I yield back to the chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Ms. Sanchez.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you again to all of you. And I just want to reiterate how proud we are of you and your work and service to our United States. I've had the pleasure of working with several of you personally, and it's just, you're top-notch people. I have a couple of questions that I want. One that is very specific to a particular program that I have for the panel, and then the second would be about our labs. As you know, we have several great ones in California. The first one is about the medical-free electron laser program. And it's peer-reviewed, it's competitive grant funding, and in partnership with the military's medical laboratories, centers selected for funding under this program have had an impressive record of technology, innovation, and invention. The Department has judged this program as being important to meeting the Joint Forces health protection capability gaps requiring medical R&D in the Department's assessment report, Guidance for Development of the Force, fiscal year 2010 to 2015. So in fiscal year 10, the military photomedicine program was placed under the wing of the Defense Health Program, DHP, and was funded with an allocation of $5 million from the GDF enhancement funding. But in the fiscal year 12, the President's request has cut that line item by $125 million, less than the program before, which means that this military photomedicine program is a program that is well-liked, has great results, but there doesn't seem to be any funding for it in the fiscal year 12 budget. So I'd like to know specifically what your ideas are on where you're going to, where the funding is going to come to continue to do that program. Sorry for getting technical, but I think you know where I'm headed.
I'll take that one on. Now, the fact is that, you know, that is a program that I have very little familiarity with in specifics. What I'd like to do is I'd like to take that for the record and get an answer back to you, because I really need to go to work with my the commander of the medical MRMC, Medical Research Command, and get an answer to that, because that would be under his realm of responsibility, and he has authority over that DHP program where I do not. But we work together very closely, and I'll get an answer for you.
Great. Well, obviously, some of my funding in my district is direct. You know, they keep changing where they get the money from, and they don't know. And as you know, stability and understanding where monies are coming from, or if they're even coming, is important as these technically very professional people, just as you would, you know, put their lives on hold to go and do something for the government, and then they don't know if they're going to have a job tomorrow. So it's about jobs, jobs, jobs. Okay. The other question that I have is about facilities. I think that this committee has invested a lot in the people between the walls. I mean, we've been working very hard and we put the money in. But I'm very concerned about this new innovative technology, innovation, creation that you all are in charge of, sitting in outdated labs or labs of the 20th century, if you will, and how can we help you, and do you need help in that arena?
Congresswoman Sanchez, let me start, and certainly the service S&T executives have specific can respond specifically with regard to their service. Having come from a federally funded research and development center, and having worked in a building that was built the same date as the Pentagon was built, I know the issues very well. We had a facility at MIT that was absolutely first rate because of its people, because of its mission. But in fact, we had facilities that were 50 years old or even older. And that wasn't part of any budget authority that would allow us to update those, and that's really your question, how do we do that? I'll simply point out that there are three things that we need in our laboratories. We have two of them. The first is a mission, a clear direction in terms of what problem are the laboratories addressing that has significance to our nation and to our department. We have that. The second is first-rate people, and I've visited many of the laboratories. In fact, we have absolutely first-rate people. But if we don't have the facilities, that third piece just isn't there, and that's really a cohesive piece. As I've visited AFRL, the Air Force Research Laboratory in Dayton, as I've visited the Naval Research Laboratory not too far from here, certainly Aberdeen and others, facilities are a big issue, and that's an authority that we probably need your help with. The services can talk specifically to their areas, but I'll simply say that as we've looked across the S&T enterprise, the science and technology enterprise, we've been clear about what our S&T priorities are, and that provides us a challenge to work with the laboratories to really make sure we fit those laboratories with the resources they need to work in those areas. I think it's going to look very different 5, 10 years from now as compared with today. The commercial sector's laboratories look very different today as they did 10 years ago. So I don't think it's just a matter of rebuilding the bricks and mortar that we have in place today. And I don't think it's even quite the same footprint. I'm not sure what the footprint actually looks like, and I think we really need to go back and look at that in light of how the commercial sector does their basic research, how academia does its, and how the Department should do our basic research efforts.
I saw that you gavelled me, so I would love to hear anybody else's response if they have a particular request of this committee to push.
If there's a brief additional response, since we have fewer members than before.
I would just add that the Naval Research Lab was authorized and appropriated in 1916, and some of the buildings look like it. We do our best to try and keep up with facilities modernization, but particularly in a day like this, it's just very difficult for labs and shore infrastructure to compete with piers and runways and the other kinds of infrastructure that directly support the mission. So it's a real challenge for us. We're trying to modernize what we have. We do have one MILCON in progress right now. It's an autonomy lab at NRL, but MILCON in particular is very difficult. And I would just like to add, thank you. You're absolutely right. The support for the people programs that the committee has put in place have been very, very helpful, because part of the challenge isn't just the facilities, but as you said, hanging on to the people that have to work in those buildings, and they look around at other opportunities. So some of the other inducements and the flexibilities that the committee has given us to do that are very helpful. Thank you.
I would just add that AFRL is not in bad shape because we had the 2005 BRAC, and so a lot of that movement has come with money to build buildings. Section 219 has also helped us build new laboratory space, and so that's been very helpful.
And just to add for the Army, BRAC is helping us about Aberdeen in particular, but all of the other laboratories have serious issues, and what I'm looking at is taking a look at it across the board instead of them being lab directors leaving them to just look at their problem on their own or in their command. I want to take that up to a higher level and work to try to figure out what our priorities should be across the laboratories in the Army. And then I look forward to working with you all to figure out what kind of authorities we can have to use funding to solve those problems.
And I'll just add, so as not to be noticeably absent, we have no captive labs at DARPA. And we rely on the health of the laboratories and the service organizations as part of our performer base.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate the gentlelady raising the issue. I think it's interesting, and it is something that we can also keep our eye on as we serve on more than one subcommittee and try to work out. Let me ask about a few things. Mr. Secretary, as I'm listening to members ask y'all a wide variety of questions, the question occurs to me about setting priorities within this wide portfolio. The intelligence community has a priorities framework, kind of a matrix on what's more important for collection purposes and what's less important for collection purposes to help prioritize. When somebody comes up with a suggestion, you see where it is on the matrix and how high a priority it may be. Is there something like that that you use to, or that the S&T community uses to help prioritize where money goes?
Chairman, let me start by outlining the very first priority, and that's support to our troops in harm's way. And there's no ambiguity there at all. We look to our joint urgent operational needs. We hear directly from the combatant commanders. We visit theater. We have a direct signal from those in theater to give us a clear indication of what's needed, and that's absolutely the first set of topics that we address. Dr. Dugan has spoken of that. My co-panelists have as well. We've all had the opportunity to engage in that discussion, engage in those deliveries. That's job one. Beyond that, we have a responsibility to set the long-term future for the Department and for the nation. Make those bets in people and ideas. And again, I'll point to DARPA as one example. The service laboratories are another example of places where we make investments in people and ideas to serve our nation's future. In that second case, in sort of the S&T piece, we've worked collectively over the past 6 or so months to identify our science and technology priorities. Those are in my testimony. And we've done that by looking at the future mission needs of the Department, taking those mission needs, creating a set of architectures, from each of those architectures outlining what are the critical capabilities that we need as a Department, and for each of those critical capabilities, what are the foundational technologies that support those needs. That allows us then to have a discussion with industry, with academia, and certainly with the services in terms of how we would transition those concepts. Now, that's an ongoing thing. There are clearly near-term needs that we're addressing, but we've got to have the ability to make bets with high risk that have enormous payoff, and we're doing that across the board. Roughly 10% of our budget is in that very high-risk area, where not all those bets will pay off, but the ones that do will have a big impact, and I think you've seen examples of each of those. But it would be too difficult, I take it, to put a number, a metric on kind of those longer-range bets that are not the immediate warfighter needs. I've had a challenge when people ask me, what's the return on investment on your S&T, your long-term bets? We've all been in that discussion. I don't know what the ROI was when Steve Jobs first proposed the iPad, but I know what it is now for that corporation. Yeah. I'm not really thinking of return on investment. I'm thinking of the priorities of the problems you face, and that's an arbitrary number. I mean, that's the way it works in the intelligence community. It's an arbitrary number about the nature of the threats, but still they get a number assigned to them, and you can argue, right or wrong, but it just helps, and that's why it occurs to me, because it just seems to me a massive, a very difficult job. So let me just make one last comment to that. There are sort of two ways that we're doing this. One is sort of across the Department, we've identified a set of science and technology priorities. There are 7 of those, and we're tracking progress in each of those. We're road mapping the technical progress, where we see the performer base, and where we see transition of those ideas to theater and to the capability set. But we also have, beyond that, the services and certainly DARPA as the engine of innovation challenging that thinking, and we should challenge that thinking. There are ideas that we have that are part of the mainstream that we clearly have to implement, but we need a channel that sort of disrupts all of that, and that starts with the computational framework that Dr. Dugan talked about. It then goes towards a discussion with the services and with industry in terms of what those ideas are, and it reaches into our academic environment to really challenge the disciplines and the training that we have for future leaders in that S&T community. So I think we're actually doing that. The challenge is it's not a simple, bounded problem. Yeah. And the interesting problems are the ones that, in fact, aren't simple and bounded, and we're in that space in many ways. Well, and I think, from my point of view at least, we want to encourage you to take some of those long bets, and we want to encourage that unconventional thinking and approach that comes. That is very important. I've got a number of other questions, but let me yield to other members. Gentleman from Rhode Island.
As we noted in our first subcommittee hearing only just 2 weeks ago, cybersecurity is quickly becoming a major challenge for our military and our nation. Dr. Dugan, you and I have spoken about this in my office, and certainly I appreciate your comments in your opening statement about our efforts to stop cyber attacks, which are divergent from the threat and are taking us on a path of spending that's unsustainable in the long term. And obviously, this challenge requires a new way of thinking about cybersecurity and learning to look at risks to our government. So I'd like to begin with you, Dr. Dugan, if I could, but then open up the questions to our panel and ask what work is being done to change how we think about cybersecurity and what's being done to better identify and mitigate our risks. And if I could And then I have another question, if I could, on some other issues. But let's start with that, if I could.
Okay, so I would like to describe 3 programs that I think characterize how far we are reaching with respect to our cyber activities. The first is a program named Proceed. About 1.5 years ago, a researcher named Craig Gentry produced what we call a theoretical construction for fully homomorphic encryption. Now, what does that mean? Homomorphic encryption is the ability to compute on encrypted data without decrypting it. Now, were we to be successful in this, it would tremendously change the risk profile of how we conduct computations in areas where we have untrusted systems or systems of unknown provenance. That's the good news. We have a theoretical construction. The bad news is that it's not yet practical. So in the first instantiation of fully homomorphic encryption, researchers performed a simple AND function. And that simple AND function took about 30 minutes. Using conventional systems, that same function would take a fraction of a nanosecond. So we are 14 orders of magnitude away in terms of our speed. The Proceed program at DARPA is devoted to changing that timeline. It is a very big reach from a research perspective. Another example is a program called CRASH, which seeks to develop cybersecurity technologies that rethink the basic hardware and software designs. It's modeled after the human immune system, which has 2 components, an innate system, which is fast and deadly against a series of known pathogens, and an adaptive system, which is slower and recognizes novel pathogens. The result for us as humans is resiliency and survivability as a species. And if we are able to achieve comparable types of effects in computer designs, then we can radically change this attack profile for the adversary. Essentially what we're doing then is flipping the asymmetry by making each computer look a little different, just as our immune systems are a little different and therefore much more difficult to attack. What we're doing under CRASH is trying to create survival of the cyber species. The last example I'd like to leave you with is a program called Cinder, which is focused on the insider threat. It is based on a mission profile rather than the detection of a series of events, single intrusion detections. The idea there is that when an insider means harm to a system, they conduct a series of events that are strung together in a mission, and that by looking for those mission profiles, we might better be able to detect them with a lower false alarm. Our overall cyber program is 100% increased over FY11, and as many of you know, we have additional funds coming in through the budget request over the FYDP to the tune of about $500 million, starting with $50 million and increasing $25 million each year thereafter. We've recruited an expert team. They come from the white hat hacker community. They come from industry. They come from a variety of sources, and we are serious about the big reach for us in cyber.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Dugan. Others comment on this issue?
Let me extend that Dr. Dugan's comments from a department perspective. One of the 7 S&T priority areas is, in fact, the cyber science and technology. It's one that we recognized and we tied directly to the existing and the future missions of the department. In fact, that's a key element of the architectures that we've done the analysis on. Over the FYDP, in the President's budget request FY12 and out, that's about a $1.6 billion investment request in 6.1 through 6.3, so it's not small. But the real issue is, where are the ideas, and where are the people, and how do we test those ideas? And so a good part of our work currently is to look broadly at what are the architectural constructs, how do we think about, how do we evaluate and test the insider threat, which is the most vicious of all, and how would we transition those concepts to operational use. I'll tell you that in the last 6 months I've been out at Pacific Command. In fact, I'll be there this weekend for testing that's going on right there in a test bed that they've put in place to not only test new concepts, but understand how those concepts apply to Pacific Fleet and to the Operational Command. How would we actually use these concepts to protect our networks and our communication portals in real time? Access to test beds like that allow the contractor community to see real data and to work in a combatant commander's environment without compromising the operational needs, but working real time with a user to evaluate new concepts is absolutely critical. So in fact, there's an architectural piece to this that's absolutely important. There's the disruptive piece that's being funded out of DARPA that's absolutely essential. And then there's how do we protect the existing networks and the existing concepts that we have in place. Secretary Lynn, in fact, in his Foreign Affairs article late last year, outlined a 5-peer strategy for that, and I'd point you in that direction. But this is a place where the Department's investments in science and technology, we have ramped up. The budget request is certainly reflective of that, and that's something that has to be in place over the next several years.
Cyber is a high priority for all the services, of course. I would just add that in the Navy, we're careful not to take it in isolation. We have to consider it in the context of the other dimensions of warfare. We really can't think just about having a cyber game or a cyber solution. How do we fight across the dimensions of kinetic, hyperspectral, and cyber? We've recently stood up, this CNO is designated a Deputy CNO for Information Dominance, Admiral Dorsett, and we've stood up the 10th Fleet. Those are our primary customers for resources requirements and operations. And I would just add that when it comes to the epidemiological model, there may be some application there, of course, but you have to remember these are like bugs that have brains. They're thinking adversaries, so they're not just bacteria. And so we're working on how maybe better to model that, working with some FFRDCs, and there's some particularly good capability up at Carnegie Mellon. Has been very forward-leaning.
On the Air Force S&T side, we're looking at something we call cyber agility, which is having the network or the system of networks move, not be at an IP address longer than a fraction of a second. So it's very hard for the attacker to find out where you are. We're also working cybersecurity issues for cloud computing as we move into that world. You know, how do we secure our data in the cloud? And just mentioned many of our projects are joint with DARPA up at Rome, New York, where AFRL Information Director is located.
And you know, I came out, one of my previous lives, I worked in the old nuclear community, and one of the things that we did when we were working in that community was if you designed something, you also did what we called the countermeasures, and then the countermeasures, and then countermeasures, which was you figured out in the design what you needed to do in order to be ahead of whoever was going to be tampering with whatever it was that you were designing. And one of the things that I'm trying to do is, as we look in our C3 portfolio, I'm going to be challenging our scientists and engineers to do a lot more of that kind of thinking, as opposed to just designing things and then, you know, kind of saying, okay, here it is, and then let somebody else go figure out how, and not know how easy or how difficult it might be to attack.
Very good. I want to thank you all for your input on this topic. Obviously, it's a growing challenge to our national security, and the cyber threat obviously is as you will recognize and we've talked about, is an evolving threat. It's very challenging to stay one step ahead of the bad guys. I'm glad to hear that you're all thinking outside the box, which is exactly what we expect you will do, and it sounds like you're on some very interesting work, and I look forward to continuing to monitor it and to work with you on this subject. With that, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back. I will have some other questions for the record, by the way, but time constraints.
I think, Chairman, I thank the gentleman. I appreciate his questions. Mr. Gibson, do you have other questions?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. For Admiral Carr, is the Navy doing anything on research for nuclear reprocessing?
You know, the Navy's organization that handles all things nuclear is NAVCO-8 under 4-star Admiral Donnell, who's double-hatted in the Department of Energy. So it's a very old, tried, trusted structure. So we don't touch things nuclear, with the exception of looking at peripheral technologies that might help. So the short answer is no, sir. We're not doing anything in that area.
How about for anybody on the panel on that? Okay, thanks. I yield back.
Ms. Sanchez, do you have other questions? Mr. West?
Yes, I just had one other follow-up question. Last week I had the opportunity to go down and get an ops intel briefing from U.S. Southern Command. And one of the things that we talk about emerging threats are these mini submersibles that are very, very hard to detect. And are we looking at new technologies to understand who may be developing these and how we come up with countermeasures as far as tracking them? Because right now the ISR platforms we have are it's very difficult for them to track these systems. Thank you.
Congressman, we've been following that activity from the semi-submersibles to the recent incident about 2 weeks ago. We have a program through our Rapid Reaction Technology Office that has both evaluated the threat, has postulated where that might go, and is starting to put in place, I'll just say, concepts to track future threats. We've worked close. I've been down to SOCOM twice. I've been down to Jayet South twice. And have, in fact, worked with the commander there to understand what the future of that AOR looks like. We've put in place, in fact, a test campaign that started 2 years ago in Key West, and we've now done 2 of these, to both collect littoral data and share that with the contractor community to build detection schemes and discrimination schemes to allow us to more rapidly detect threats like that. So we're absolutely on top of that. In fact, not only at SOCOM, but not only at Southcom, but also as part of Jayet South and SOCOM, we're exploring that.
Thank you very much, sir. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Gibson's question raises a question in my mind. This morning we had Secretary of Navy, CNO, in front of the full committee. Lots of questions about alternative energy sources and so forth. Mr. Secretary, using that as an example, I'm sure all of the services, and certainly DARPA, are doing research into alternative energy because of its obvious importance that we all know. How do you coordinate something like that? Because it would seem to me the temptation would be for everybody to be pursuing these various alternatives, but yet, part of the sensitivity story today about how many duplicative federal programs there are in a whole variety of domestic areas. It's good to have competing ideas pursuing research, and yet the budget that we face. So you understand the gives and takes here that we're kind of looking at, and so using energy as an example, how do you figure out what's duplicative, what's needed, and so forth?
Chairman, let me echo as well that duplicative research is actually not a bad thing. Competing research is actually a very good thing because it challenges our thinking. Duplicative procurement is something quite different. So on the S&T piece, getting competing concepts on the table in a fair game exchange, in a shootout for what works and what doesn't, and understanding what that trade space is the game that you see in front of you, and we're in that space in many areas. It's interesting that the energy issue came up this morning. In fact, I was at ARPA-E yesterday giving a talk, and Secretary Mabus will be there on Wednesday announcing a collaboration that the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy has to develop concepts really across the board. I'd sort of answer the question, though, in terms of how do we structure our investments in 2 areas. There are S&T concepts that are sort of unitary concepts, and we have a number of those that you've seen. Many of those have paid great dividends, and they're starting to find their way into the acquisition system. Batteries are just one example. So high-efficiency solar cells are yet another example. A terrific opportunity for the private sector to actually drive in an area where the Department needs that capability. But there's, in fact, a much bigger issue, and that is the system implementation of how do we go from storage to use, and really the full concept of how we would implement a energy-efficient end-to-end solution. much of the alternative fuel program is now centered not so much in the ideas, but on getting the price down of a producible alternative fuel system that could be brought to market. In fact, those programs are pretty far along. They're very far along technically, but it's now the issue of how do we build a business case and work with the private sector to commercialize the early S&T concepts. So I think you're seeing lots of cases where the Department has recognized the need for alternative fuels and reduction in power and energy storage to meet our needs. Ground combat vehicles are a great example of this. The Navy's fleets are another good example of this, and it goes on and on. But at this point, it really is sort of driving the cost down from first use to implementation.
I would just add very quickly that we do collaborate, and particularly with the Air Force and working with aircraft technologies to get fuel efficiency up. We're collaborating on development of an engine that's a high-low bypass engine. It used to be you could either go supersonic efficiently or slow like an airliner efficiently. I'd like to develop an engine that does both. Higher temperature, of course, means more efficiency, so we're collaborating on some turbine blade coatings and developments. So there are things that are uniquely naval, particularly underwater. UUV technology is sort of a niche, but I think we try hard to collaborate where it makes sense, and look within for those special niches where we have them. For Marines, power and energy just means make me lighter. Give me juice, but don't make me carry so much weight. Lighter batteries, photovoltaics, things that will generate power, and you can recover energy just from walking. So we're a little unique because we have aircraft, ground pounders, and ships and vehicles.
Yeah, okay, good. Dr. Dugan, let me ask this. With Mr. Langevin's questions on cyber, and you talked about several of the initiatives that DARPA has in cyber. I suspect that Dell and HP are also working kind of a next generation computing that could be more secure because it would be a product that they could sell. My question is, how, in making your decisions on which products to pursue, how do you factor in what private industry is doing on its own and ensure that you are supplemental rather than something that in some way distorts the market or replaces what they're doing on their own?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I would tell you that the program managers at DARPA are experts in their field. They are very often very closely coupled with their colleagues and experts in private industry and in academia, as an example. The clean slate initiatives that we are investigating are perhaps the ones that touch most closely on your question. So the traditional impediment for investigating clean slate initiatives, new designs, whole new designs for operating systems or computing systems, is often limited by challenges against the feasibility of employing them economically. So one of the things that we began to look at is exactly the opportunity for insertion for new technology, such as clean slate design as articulated under CRASH. And what we observed is that by 2012, the purchase of smartphones, as an example, will exceed the purchase of laptop and desktop computers combined. Therein lies an opportunity to insert new technology that is consistent with the business models and the economic aims of many of those in private industry. We are actively engaged with them. They are part of our research projects, and so I feel that that close coupling is healthy at DARPA.
Okay. Mr. Secretary, let me broaden the question a little bit. How do you maintain visibility in what the private sector is doing in order to integrate not only across those of you who are there, but into those efforts?
Well, first of all, many of us came from the private sector, and we've got a remarkable Rolodex. The hours and the salary changed, but the Rolodex didn't. And so, in fact, it's critically important that we maintain that coupling. I think you'd find every one of us spends a lot of time engaging with industry, whether it's conferences, whether it's on a study panel. I know that in cyber, for example, early last year, when we wanted to sort of get ground truth of what was happening in the private sector, we brought people in We convened a study that included leading universities and leading companies to come in and tell us what are your leading ideas that you're supporting. So it really is a full-time engagement, and this is really across our staffs. I would echo Dr. Dugan's point that her program managers are best in class. We pull them from industry. After a few years, you send them back, and they've made a great contribution to the nation.
What effect, if any, does the lack of a long-term reauthorization on the Small Business Innovative Research Program have on your ability to do strategic planning and integration of those efforts into core S&T programs?
Chairman, let me start with that. That's, as you and I have talked, that's a particular concern of mine. We deal with the small business community all the time. And I'll give you one specific example. There's a program that we're funding in the L.A. area to build an airship, and we are working with a small company, and we are simply metering out payments to this company. It's a 30-member company, and they're sort of hanging by a thread. So we can't do long-range planning without a budget in place, and it puts those companies at risk. The same was true with a small company that I saw on the Eastern Shore of Maryland that's building force protection equipment for our troops. It's simply a matter of scaling it out. It's like building a house, and instead of building it on the cost and architect's budget and timeline that you'd like, you sort of stretch it out, and it's going to cost more. So there's an unpaid bill that's a result of this, and it's adding enormous risk to our small business community.
Dr. Freeman, this may not be fair, but I have the idea that a lot of medical research that is done at the Department of Defense has a tenuous connection to the warfighter or even our service people. A lot of it's been foisted upon the department by Congress, and now I don't know if that's, but it does occur to me that as budgets tighten and as we have these extremely serious, urgent issues like Mr. Gibson was asking about, that we might have to adjust our priorities a little bit. And some of these things that in the field of medical research that the department's been doing may need to take a lower priority. You have any comment about that?
Yeah, you bring up a tremendously important issue for us. And it has several aspects, right? I mean, one of them is the medical research command has gotten a tremendous amount of ads over the years, earmarks over the years, and in fact, they had to stand up in order to handle the very large volume of those. They had to stand up an organization basically to handle all of that, and of course. We have some issues as we remain on a continuing resolution, if we do, that basically, in 11 we're okay because we are continuing to operate those particular programs and execute those programs from past ads. However, as we move to 12, we're going to have to seriously consider what we do there. So one of them is the infrastructure that has caused in our medical community, and so we got to deal with that. But we are dealing with that, and the commander and I are dealing with that. The second issue that you bring, however, is what I would call kind of just a huge smattering of a variety of topics that have been funded over time some in the program, but mostly in the non-core budget. And I have mixed feelings about those. I really do. The first thing is that a lot of those things that don't seem maybe on the surface to be really, really beneficial to our servicemen and women actually are. Breast cancer is a huge issue for not only the women of this country. I'm a breast cancer survivor, so I'm very glad all that research was there. But also for our females in the military, and so even though that may not have been intended entirely for the military, it has had a great benefit, as have many of those kinds of efforts. On the other hand, you're absolutely right. We are going to have to tighten our belt take a look, and you mentioned the word priorities. I mentioned the word priorities in my testimony. And I think we're going to have to look at that, and we're going to have to look at that hard. What I will tell you is that we do have to maintain a very broad look at all of the different kinds of medical research that need to be done. And so as we look at, what we're doing, we have to look in many different ways. We have to look at treatment. We have to look at prevention. We have to look at vaccines. We have to look at an awful lot of those things which do really help our servicemen and women. Some of those historic things will go away as we take a hard look at those things. Some of those things we will have to continue. One of the big issues that we have by not being able to move things out of the medical research in a very fast manner is the approval process for drugs and so on and so forth, which of course stymies an awful lot of as we go through, and we want to be sure we are absolutely doing the right thing. But that takes it a long time to get the things that can be beneficial out to our warfighters. So I think you bring up a really good point, and I'd love to discuss it further with you.
Well, I guess, yeah, I would too. And you, I appreciate the points you make, but we can't duplicate NIH at DOD. So I appreciate it. Dr. Walker, you mentioned in your statement some upgrade kind of research on missiles and so forth. I'm thinking about our strategic triad and so forth. Do you all have anything going on, though, as far as, and maybe this would not be S&T in these accounts, but as far as replacements, what sort of work is the Air Force doing as far as missile technology goes? You look around the world and there are lots of missiles that a lot of people have. Are we doing the kind of research we need to understand that and possibly have our own improved systems if we choose to?
Great question. We are heavily invested in the Air Force S&T program in propulsion and guidance technologies for Minuteman III type replacement strategic systems. We, in particular, are looking at advanced inertial measurement unit guidance packages for denied GPS environments and applying those to strategic systems, and as well as looking at solid propellant S&T work out at our Edwards facility to, among other things, maintain that industrial base that's so critical to the nation, and look at next generation type ICBM systems. It's interesting you asked the question. I came from DARPA, actually, as well, and DARPA and the Air Force are working a program looking at conventional strategic systems technology program, and the Air Force piece of that is looking at the DARPA design for that boost glide vehicle system and looking at how would you use that to strike targets from a strategic standpoint. So actually we are tied at the hip on that program, and conventional strike at this point, it's a technology look, but it's important, I think, for future options in our strategic systems. Thank you.
I think so too. I think it's important to have future options beyond our current systems. Let me ask, Mr. Langevin, do you have other questions? Mr. Gibson, you have other questions? Well, I think y'all wore us out. I suspect there will be other questions that we would submit for the record, but again, I appreciate each of you being here today. I appreciate your patience while we had votes, and appreciate the work that you and your organizations do. With that, the hearing stands adjourned.